Hello, Dr. Dan Yachter here for news, views, and weekly updates. Happy Wednesday, everybody. We're going to go ahead and dive in. Last night, we had a phenomenal masterclass. Hormones, thyroid stress. There's a lot to cover. It's a very complex topic, not easy to teach on. And truth be told, it's probably the most complicated material to relate, teach upon, and communicate. And it's probably the toughest masterclass that I teach all year long because there's so much to teach. There's so many different angles, so many different ways to unpack the topic. And I got a lot of great feedback. Also got some feedback saying that, there was a lot of stuff and it was kind of like drinking out of a fire hose last night. But all in all, very positive. We had a great crowd and we learned a lot. We elevated our knowledge on how to balance hormones, stress, and thyroid. I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview over the next coming weeks. I'm going to break down the material for you. We're going to talk about testing. We're going to talk about several different aspects of hormonal health. This week, I'm going to give you an overview. Next week, we're going to talk about the relationship of the spine, the nervous system, how it relates to the organs involved with hormonal production. We're then going to talk about the following week, nutrition and supplementation that can help balance hormones. The following week, we're going to talk about testing and markers. How do you accurately test your hormones? Are blood markers the only way to test hormones, or are there other tests that can do it? Well, of course, there are other ways to do it. There are more complete ways of testing hormones, hormonal health. We're going to talk about the impact of exercise, the research that's just coming out on how to effectively balance hormones, thyroid health, how to reduce stress with the right type of exercise, and of course, just overall mindset, emotional management of stress, stress resiliency, how to create stress resilience. So we're going to talk about that and so much more, but let me go ahead and just spend time today talking about really the highlights of last night of the hormone, stress, thyroid masterclass. Just before I jump into that, mark your calendars for next month on November 18th, diabetes reversal, blood sugar control. For those of you guys who were here last night or regularly attend the master classes, you know where to find all of the slides that I had last night during the presentation had shown. You know where to find them. They're contained within our website. The other announcement I wanted to make is you can find going forward, if you're out there, you're going to be able to watch my master classes on our YouTube channel. So if you ever wanted to view those, if you're not a current active patient, you're not in the area, you're not able to physically attend our master classes, you're now able to find those master classes on our YouTube channel. As the days and weeks go on, I'm going to be uploading all of the most current video recordings of the master classes. You'll be able to grab those, and I'll go ahead and I'm going to post inside of our private group. I will post that link. I'll post it on my profile here as well, the YouTube link, where you can go and watch the previously recorded master classes. We're going to try to post the most recent ones over the last year up until the first half of 2025. So you'll be able to get those. And in the Facebook group, it's called My Family, My Mission. If you're not a member yet, join. You're going to find a video that I just posted there that you're going to want to watch. It's a very important video. It's called An Inconvenient Study. Go there, watch it. It's a very important study that you're going to want to check out. An inconvenient study. And this video is very powerful, life-changing, life-altering, especially if you're interested in the topic of vaccines. There has never, ever, ever, and I call you out to challenge me on this statement, there has never been a double-blind, placebo, random-controlled trial safety study ever performed on one vaccine that is on the market today, that you're shooting your kids up with, that you're shooting yourself up with. And that's why this video is very important to watch. If you are concerned or have any concern with what goes inside of your body or your children's body, you may want to take a look at this video. It was just posted inside of our private group, My Family, My Mission. So let me go ahead and jump into the highlights from last night. Of course, we talked about the fact that there are over 50 hormones, approximately 50 main hormones in the body, a couple hundred in total if you add in all the kind of the subcategories of hormones. But there's one part of the body, of the brain, called the hypothalamus, that is really the major regulator of all of the other hormonal systems of the body. And there's one aspect of our lives that will impact that part of the brain more so than any other part. It's emotional stress. And the effect of that emotional stress, the impact it could have in terms of producing fight or flight stimuli in our body, sympathetic fight or flight or freeze, the release of adrenaline, the over release of cortisol, the chronic elevated levels of cortisol, and the damaging effect it has on our hormones. We talked about that last night, including the effect and the impact it has on the thyroid. We talked about testosterone, estrogen. We talked about the cycle of hormones in the body, the male and female cycle of how hormones are supposed to begin after puberty, the levels that they're supposed to stay at, and what they're supposed to drop to for a woman, what's normal and what's not normal. We talked about natural menopause and menopause for men. And we talked about the different medical options and the risks of medical treatments, hormone replacement therapy, and the impact it has on the body, testosterone replacement therapy, the dangers, and I'll point this out for you men especially. I will highly caution you as to the impact of taking synthetic hormones, testosterone replacement therapy. And again, it's a personal choice, but where I've seen in several cases over the years that I've seen with synthetic testosterones coming into men's bodies in particular, their testosterone can have a blood thickening effect, create clots. It can stimulate the growth of the prostate, benign prostatic hyperplasia, and growth of existing prostate cancers, high red blood cell counts, which can increase the risk of clotting. So you have to be very careful with that. There are a lot of men out there who, when they see their blood values, where they're told that you should be at 700-800 on your total testosterone, and they get a blood panel back and they're at 150 or 200, most men freak out, and they get concerned and they start going the way of drug treatments, either pellets or shots, injections, pills, creams, but mainly shots and injections or pellets in their behind where they're shot. And again, testosterone, exogenous artificial sources can cause fluid retention, acne, swell the prostate. They certainly can decrease the size of testicles, reduce your sperm count, and thicken the blood. There are a lot of negative consequences of taking exogenous sources of these hormones. We talked about this in length last night. Talked about the dangers of birth control. We got quite a bit into that, and that those two are known to thicken the blood and elevate stroke risk. So we talked about a phenomenon that occurs in the body with chronically elevated levels of stress, cortisol elevated for long periods of time, causes something called cortisol steal syndrome, or pregnenolone steal, mainly cortisol steal syndrome, which causes a reappropriation of resources in the body that typically go into the manufacturing of normal levels of hormones, but under chronic levels of fight or flight, the distribution is heavily loaded toward the production of cortisol, leaving the resources necessary for normal production of hormones at a deficient state, and again called cortisol steal syndrome. And again, when that happens for long periods of time, elevated levels of cortisol steal away the resources for normal production of hormones and leave you depleted or imbalanced. That's the impact of long-term emotional stress left, unchecked, left unmanaged. And we talked quite a bit about that last night in regards to stress management and the things that we can do to lessen the impact of stress on the hypothalamus and on the hypothalamus's response and its impact across the board on global hormonal balance. That one hormone, cortisol, skews the balance of all 50 other hormones in the body and creates major problems if it's not managed properly. So we went through in depth the major lifestyle therapeutic approaches you can take, the lifestyle modifications you can do, all natural, to help balance stress, balance the impact of that stress on the hypothalamus, and balance your hormones naturally without medical therapeutic interventions. And so a lot of attendees last night were very happy to hear that there are things you can do naturally, one being getting sleep dialed in. If you're not sleeping well, your stress resilience goes off the cliff. So sleep rhythms. We went through sleep architecture last night. How do we get healthy sleep? What are the top 8 ways? We went through the top 8 ways you can set yourself up for good, deep sleep, where you can get deep REM sleep. You can increase your length of REM and deep sleep, thereby creating greater hormonal balance, stress resiliency. When you're sleeping better, you're more resilient to stress. It's not about getting rid of stress. It's about becoming more resilient to it. And sleep is right at the core of developing not just stress resiliency, but balancing hormones, balancing the thyroid, and just being more successful at life. So again, we talked about that. How do you set yourself up for better sleep? Many, many different ways. How do you measure your cortisol? We went through the premier test on the market today, testing the impact of stress on your body, called the Dutch test. We talked about foods, stress-busting foods. We talked about the way that the Dutch test, the dried urine test with comprehensive hormones, can show you the quality of your hormones. Blood markers test the quantity, how much hormone you have, but the Dutch, a urine test showing how hormones are being metabolized through your body and showing you the quality of your hormones, or the quality of how your hormones are being used, what is actually going on in your body, how they're being detoxified after being used. What does that picture look like? The Dutch gives you a picture like no other test out there on the market. And we talked about that quite a bit. We talked about foods, the impact of foods on the body, and the foods that actually impact your liver, your body's ability to detox used up hormones, and how do you create balance? Which foods create hormonal imbalance? Which foods create hormonal balance? We talked about organic acids, how to, the Dutch test looks at organic acids, whereas what happens in the body as hormones are being metabolized, which no other test does this. No other test out there does this like the Dutch test, but it looks at organic acids, it looks at sex hormones, and it looks at stress hormones. The organic acids are metabolites that are left over as your body is going through its metabolic pathways. So I'll give you an example. The analogy that I always use is the old Henry Ford, basically assembly line. So the automobiles, the Model Ts are being assembled, and you have one person along the assembly line that's putting on the chassis, and then they put the wheels on. You have another person who's putting, the seats in. You have another person who's putting the steering wheel on. And so the person down the line here is putting the steering wheel on falls asleep. Well, what happens to the assembly line? All of the parts and pieces that are being assembled, like the whole assembly line backs up because this one person who has one job, putting the steering wheel on, falls asleep. Well, if you're deficient in a vitamin that's necessary to keep the metabolic assembly line flowing, the vitamin's deficient, that vitamin falls asleep. Well, there are a lot of metabolites that are going to be backing up in the body, a lot of these different organic acids. And the Dutch test measures that. So if you're deficient in B12, there's a urine metabolite called methylmalonate that will back up, and you can measure this in a urine test. If you're deficient in vitamin B6, there's another one, keen urinate, that backs up, and that can show you if you're deficient in B6. Biotin, glutathione, a gut marker called inokin. All these will show up and show us, are there breaks in your metabolic pathways that are essential for hormonal balance? These tests, they look at your body like no other test does, and hardly any doctors do this level of evaluation. Again, we talked about cacao, dark chocolate, the benefit it has on hormones across the board, especially estrogen. We talked about the foods that help balance testosterone. And again, we went through the major lifestyle natural interventions that you can do on a daily basis, sleeping, one of the major ones, the spine's involvement. We'll talk more about that as the weeks go on. But we tied it all together and then also showed a way to get your hands on a Dutch test. A simple take-home test comes in an envelope. You pee on a couple of strips, and it can really show what I call your metabolic, your hormonal biography. What really is going on with your hormonal story? What's happening? What are the unique factors that are going on in your body that are blocking hormonal health or hormonal balance? So we talked about that Dutch test in length. And then we talked about which markers are most important to get tested. So one of the things, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, be on the lookout. I'm going to post the link to the YouTube channel where we have a ton of video resources. And you'll see in the coming weeks, I'm going to be posting over the last year all of the masterclass recordings. You can access them for free. There's no password that you need. Just go in there, subscribe, and you'll be able to watch those. And again, you'll be able to see all of the different classes that we have. If you want the slides and the notes, you need the password, and that's located on or inside of our website. So be on the lookout. I'll be posting that YouTube link inside of our private group and also my personal profile where you're watching this broadcast. Thank you for joining me on this segment of news, views, and weekly updates. We'll see you next Wednesday. Dr. Dan Yachter signing off. God bless.